He had been sitting there for 3 hours, his fingers nervously tracing the rim of the chipped coffee cup, the cold liquid inside long forgotten. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, slow at first, then with the steady rhythm of something that wouldn't stop. The little cafe was nearly empty now, except for him, the man with tired eyes, still waiting for someone who might never come. His name was Daniel, and today he was waiting for the girl who had promised to meet him one last time before leaving town forever. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps stories like this reach more hearts like yours. Daniel had arrived early, much earlier than he should have. The clock had struck 2 when he sat down, but it was now past 5, and she still hadn't come. Every time the bell above the cafe door rang, his heart leapt, only to fall again when it wasn't her. He didn't even know why he was still there. Maybe it was guilt, maybe hope, maybe love, the kind that doesn't fade easily no matter how much time or pain has passed. A year ago, he wouldn't have imagined sitting alone in a place like this, waiting for a girl who had every reason to hate him. Back then, Daniel had everything. His own small photography studio, steady clients, and a smile that made people trust him instantly. That's when he met her, Lily. She wasn't like anyone else. She didn't belong to his world of busy streets and expensive lenses. She came from the outskirts of town, where people measured wealth not in money but in small kindnesses, like lending a neighbor sugar or fixing an old bicycle. Daniel first saw her at a park, where she was sketching under an oak tree. Her dress was simple, worn at the edges, but there was something about her presence, quiet, unbothered, full of an unspoken grace, that pulled him in. He started talking to her that day, and soon he was visiting that park more often, finding excuses just to see her. They would sit under the tree and talk about dreams. Hers were simple. She wanted to become an art teacher, maybe open a small studio for kids who couldn't afford lessons. His were louder, fame, recognition, exhibitions, but somehow their worlds fit together, if only for a while. It was Lily who taught him to slow down, to see beauty in the unnoticed. The cracks in old walls, the colors in puddles after the rain, the laughter of street kids playing with a broken ball. For a time, Daniel began to believe that maybe love didn't have to be perfect to be real. But the world around them wasn't kind. Daniel's career began to take off. Clients came, and so did parties, city lights, and people who spoke in polished tones and looked at Lily with subtle disdain. He started hiding her, not out of shame but out of weakness, too afraid of what others might say. She noticed, of course, she always did. The night everything fell apart was cold and unforgiving. He had promised to meet her at the park, but instead, he went to a gallery event that could change his life. When he finally arrived, hours late, she was gone. On the bench where she usually sat, he found only a small sketch, a drawing of him, holding a camera, smiling, with the words written softly beneath, "You never noticed, but I always waited for you." She left town the next morning. No goodbye, no note, just silence. And for months, Daniel carried that silence like a wound that wouldn't heal. His work began to crumble, his inspiration gone. The world that once praised him turned away. And somewhere between regret and loneliness, he found himself staring at her old sketches, realizing what he had lost. Not just a person, but a part of himself. Then, last week, a letter arrived. It was from Lily. Her words were gentle, almost forgiving. She wrote that she had been accepted to teach at a community art center in another city, and that she would be passing through his town for one day only. She didn't know if he'd want to see her, but she'd be at the cafe by the train station at 5 in the evening. "If you come," she wrote, "I'll know you still remember." And so, Daniel waited. The minutes stretched, the rain fell harder, and his hope began to fade with the light outside. He thought about leaving more than once, but something inside him refused to move. Maybe it was the memory of her laughter. Maybe it was the promise of forgiveness. Or maybe, after losing everything, this was the only thing left that mattered. At 5:47, the door finally opened. She stepped in quietly, shaking the rain from her old umbrella. Her dress, the same one she used to wear in the park, was faded now, but she still carried herself with the same quiet dignity. When she saw him, she froze for a moment, then smiled, a small, hesitant smile that reached her eyes. Daniel stood up too quickly, knocking over his cup. The crash startled them both, but then they laughed softly, and the tension broke just a little. He wanted to say 1,000 things. "I'm sorry I missed you, you were right." But the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he just pulled out a chair for her. She sat down, her fingers brushing the table nervously, as if unsure of what to say either. They talked, first about little things, the weather, the town, her job. Then, slowly, the walls began to fall. She told him how hard it had been at first, how she had worked in a diner, saved every coin, and painted on scrap paper when she couldn't afford canvases. But she never stopped dreaming. "Sometimes," she said softly, "dreams don't die. They just wait for you to be brave enough to find them again." Daniel listened, every word piercing him deeper. He told her about his own failures, how he had lost clients, how he'd stopped taking pictures altogether. "Without you," he said, "the world lost its color." There was silence then, heavy, but not cruel, just real. Outside, the rain began to fade, and the streetlights flickered to life, painting the world in soft gold. Lily looked at him, her eyes calm but unreadable. "You hurt me," she whispered. "But I think we both needed to lose something to understand what we were holding." He wanted to ask her to stay, to start again, to forgive him completely. But he knew life wasn't that simple. So instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out something, a small photograph. It was old, faded, but it showed her sitting under the oak tree, sunlight in her hair, sketching. "This," he said, "was the last picture I ever took that mattered." Her fingers trembled as she took it. And then for the first time in a long time, tears filled her eyes. "You kept it? I never stopped looking at it," he said quietly. "It reminded me of who I used to be before I forgot what mattered." She smiled through the tears, and for a moment, it felt as if time had folded back on itself. Their younger selves sitting under that same oak tree, laughing at nothing, dreaming of everything. But the station clock struck 6, and the spell broke. Her train was leaving soon. When she stood up, Daniel's heart ached with something he couldn't describe. "So this is goodbye again?" he asked. Lily looked at him for a long time. "Maybe not," she said softly. "Maybe it's just a different kind of waiting." She placed the photograph gently on the table and walked toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back. "If you ever learn to see the world again, Daniel," she said, "you'll find me in the colors." And then she was gone. He stood there long after she left, the sound of her footsteps fading into the distance. The cafe was quiet again, except for the rain starting once more. He sat down slowly, staring at the photograph on the table. There, frozen in time, was the girl who had changed everything. He picked up his old camera for the first time in months, aimed it at the empty chair across from him, and clicked. When the picture developed later that night, it showed the chair, the soft light from the window, and the single photograph she had left behind. Somehow, the image carried warmth, a trace of her presence, of forgiveness, of something still alive between them. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Instead, he began to plan. He reopened his studio, dusted off the old sign, and started taking pictures again, not of models or parties, but of ordinary people, their small joys, their silent struggles. He called the project The Ones Who Waited. Months later, his collection was displayed in the very gallery that had once made him forget who he was. But this time, every photograph had a story. The last picture in the exhibit, the one that made people stop, linger, and often cry, was the one he took that day in the cafe. Underneath it, a small caption read, "She walked in wearing her only dress, but she carried more grace than all the world's beauty combined." And in that moment, standing before his work, Daniel realized something. Love doesn't always return the way we expect. Sometimes it leaves, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it simply transforms us so deeply that we're never the same again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps more people find these stories of love, loss, and second chances. Before you go, let us know in the comments, would you wait for someone if you weren't sure they'd come back? Because sometimes the ones who wait are the ones who love the deepest.